When will the lies stop? There's a lot of confusion surrounding the 1991 Eastern Conference Final Series between the Detroit Pistons and the Chicago Bulls. That is mostly due to how badly the Bulls defeated the Bad Boys Pistons. They were swept by an average margin of 11.5 points per game. The explanation that we've gone for the way they were dismantled was that the Pistons were too old and too banged up. Since they were not at full strength, it almost tainted the Bulls' series victory in the eyes of some NBA fans. I'm here to tell you that is completely false. I have the real reason why the Pistons got destroyed by the Bulls. It's all because Michael Jordan dominated the series, right? I wouldn't go that far. His performance was excellent, don't get me wrong. He averaged 29.8 points on nearly 54% shooting, 7 assists, 5.3 rebounds, 2.3 steals, and 1.8 blocks per game. He was extraordinary on both ends of the floor, but he was scoring at a lower rate than his regular season average. The most he scored in that series was 35 points. For his lofty standards, that's not considered special. So the Bulls didn't exact revenge on their arch nemesis because of Michael's offensive explosion. There has to be more to it. If we look back at some of the explanations that we've gone throughout the years, it still leaves some question marks. For example, in all the documentaries about Michael Jordan, the Chicago Bulls, or the Bad Boys Pistons, they always credit the mental toughness that the Bulls gained that helped them stand up to the bully, and that allowed them to finally get past the hurdle that the Pistons were to them. But that just always seemed too simplistic. I do concede that the Bulls did a much better job in not reacting to their physical play. They refused to get drawn into an all-out physical confrontation, but they also stood their ground when it was necessary. Horace Grant even admitted to the Chicago Tribune that season that it frustrated the Pistons when they kept their composure. So I believe that aspect was important. From an X's and O's standpoint, it was a supremely underrated defense that made the Pistons look like they didn't belong. They couldn't figure out how to crack the energetic Bulls defense. Let's take a look at the numbers. The Pistons averaged 100.1 points per game for the regular season, but for this series, they were held to 95.3 points per game. We'll get to why the whole "they were too old and banged up" claim is bogus in just a moment, but let's first prove that the Pistons weren't the only team to underperform due to Chicago's dominant defense. In the first round, the New York Knicks averaged 17.1 points less than the regular season average. In the second round, the Philadelphia 76ers averaged 11.2 points less than the regular season average. And in the finals, the Los Angeles Lakers averaged 14.7 points less than the regular season average. So I guess the Bulls made everyone look old and banged up. There is a reason why Chicago went 15-2 in the playoffs. But let's go back to the series in question. Let's look at some of the numbers that the Pistons players recorded. We first have Joe Dumars, who was their leading scorer in the regular season with a 20.4 points per game average. He was held to 12.5 points for the series. James Edwards and Bill Laimbeer, who combined to average 24.6 points in the regular season, averaged a combined 13.1 points for the series. The secret to the Bulls' success was their constant pressure on the ball that didn't allow the Pistons to set up their half-court offense. The two-man offensive game, usually featuring Isiah and Bill running a pick and roll, with Laimbeer either shooting a wide-open jumper or Thomas driving to the basket, was completely eliminated. The Bulls were so effective in fighting through screens and switching defenders, allowing Horace Grant and Scottie Pippen to bother Isiah with their length. They showed that their traps, pressure, and athleticism on defense were the most dangerous weapon. You had Scottie Pippen, who was all over the court. Take for example his Game 1 performance when he had 6 steals and 5 blocks. The only other player to record over 5 steals and 5 blocks in a playoff game is Hakeem Olajuwon. When you have a player averaging over 3 steals and 2 blocks, along with 22 points per game, how do you even contend with that? Then we have the defensive versatility of Horace Grant. We're talking about a 6'10" power forward who could guard the full length of the floor. If that's an incredible luxury to have in today's game, imagine the advantage the Bulls had during that time. And finally, they had the greatest two-way player in NBA history. Michael Jordan played an important role in forcing the backcourt of the Pistons to play inefficiently. For example, Jackie McMullen made this interesting observation for an ESPN article in 2020 about Jordan's strong defensive play against the Detroit Pistons. Quote, "In that series, Detroit averages 0.79 points per play with Jordan as a primary defender and charges 35%, according to ESPN Stats and Info. Jordan relentlessly tracked guards Isiah Thomas and Joe Dumars, pickpocketing them in the backcourt or springing out of his low defensive stance with cat-like quickness to flood their passing lanes." End of quote. And that's exactly what we saw. Joe Dumars was affected the most by Jordan's stifling defense. He averaged 34.7% from the field for the series. That is the lowest field goal percentage that he shot in a series for his career. So don't think for a second that the Pistons were no longer a formidable opponent just because they got their butts handed to them. Don't forget that Isiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Dennis Rodman, and John Salley were all under the age of 30 at the start of the season. This wasn't like the Bulls were playing the 1999 Houston Rockets. The series wasn't close because that's how good the Bulls defense was. If you think I'm guilty of revisionist history, check out this quote from the Washington Post back in 1991 before the start of the playoffs. Quote, "Why will Detroit be so tough to beat again? Isiah and Dumars are still the best backcourt in the league. Rodman is still the best defender. Salley is a dunking/swatting monster. Aguirre, a 25-point scorer for his career, is certainly capable of filling Vinnie Johnson's old role. And there's always Lambeer." End of quote. This team was expected to be a threat. This team was expected to give the Bulls problems, but they ended up being exposed. For the record, I understand that Isiah Thomas was limited. He has said multiple times that his quote, "career-ending wrist surgery" was the reason why they were swept. I understand that the Pistons were a bit banged up throughout the year. But come on, Bill Lambier and Dennis Rodman played all 82 games. Joe Dumars played 80 games. Mark Aguirre played 78 games. And John Salley and James Edwards played over 70 games. They weren't as banged up as you think they were. They simply lost to a better team. Even if they were 100% healthy, the result wouldn't be much different. It was time for the Chicago Bulls to start the greatest dynasty in the modern NBA, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. But that's just my 2 cents. What do you think was the main reason why the Bulls swept the Detroit Pistons? What do you remember the most from that series? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.